a series right now called Beat the Heat, Lessons in the Desert with Moses. And yes, the church does have a YouTube channel, and we're going to try and upload a few sermons to the YouTube channel and see how that works, see how it looks. We're in Exodus chapter 16 today. If you want to follow along with me in your Bibles or on the screen. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. Month and a half, folks. It's a month and a half since they've gone on the land. This is how long it took them. This is how far they could get before they started crying, right? You know, every now and then, you know, if you've got the children, sometimes children will get mad and they will put a few things in a knapsack and they'll bundle up their stuff and put it on the right, like old school. Put it in the backpack, march out the front door and down the street. I am running away. How far do they usually get? Into the street, right, into the block. This is Israel's end of the block. This is as far as they get. Month and a half. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions." I feel like I should put that in neon text. I will see whether they will follow my instructions. Teachers, can I get an amen? First day of school every day, I swear. All right? Here's the deal. On the sixth day, they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we that you should grumble against us?" Moses also said, "You will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him." Who are we? You're not grumbling against us, but against the Lord. Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" While Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked toward the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. The Lord said to Moses, "I've heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." That evening quail came and covered the camp. And in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. It's mystery meat. Mystery bread. Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent." By the way, an omer is like about as much as a quart-sized mason jar. It's like about that much. The Israelite clarifies it's like a tenth of an ephah or something, but that doesn't help us because we don't use ephahs either. Meanwhile, the Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some little. And when they measured it by the omer, the ones who gathered much did not have too much, and the ones who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. Then Moses said to them, "No one is to keep any of it until morning." Instructions. However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. Each morning everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person, and the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning." So they saved it until morning, as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. "Eat it today," Moses said, "because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days are you to gather it, but on the seventh day, the Sabbath, there will not be any." Well, that's easy. Don't go out and get more on the Sabbath. There it is. Nevertheless, some of the people went on the seventh day to gather it, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That's why on the sixth day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the seventh day. No one is to go out." So the people rested on the seventh day. The people of Israel called the bread manna. It was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Take an omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come, so they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the wilderness when I brought you out of Egypt." So Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it. Then place it before the Lord to be kept for the generations to come." As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron put the manna with the tablets of the covenant law so that it might be preserved. The Israelites ate manna 40 years until they came to a land that was settled. They ate manna until they reached the border of Canaan. So this story begins with Israel lasting a month and a half before they're ready to string Moses and Aaron up. "You brought us out here to die." That's the big accusation. And I love this because they longed for the good old days. You remember the good old days? We had we had meat to eat back then. Just a little detail, just a minor detail, they were slaves. They might have been eating meat, but they were slaves. They were not their own masters. They were not in control of their own destiny. And you know what? It wasn't a good situation. But you know what? They kind of missed those days because back then they could pass along the blame, couldn't they? If they were having a miserable time, they could say, "Well, it's not my fault I'm having a miserable time. It's the evil Egyptians that are making my life miserable." Right? They got to blame somebody else for their situation. And they kind of missed those days because now, as free people, they're following Moses out in the desert. And yes, they're hungry. I get it. So God heard their grumbling. He heard the fact that they were ready to ditch God after a month and a half. And bear in mind, these are the same people that saw all 10 plagues of Egypt. They saw the power of God. These are the same people who saw Moses part the Red Sea. This is the same crowd. These are the same people that have seen a pillar of fire following or leading them by night. This is the same crowd that sees the glory of the Lord in a cloud leading them by day, each and every day. This is the same group. But God's heard their grumbling, and he's going to use this moment to teach them. Now, it's one thing to feed Israel, and he's going to feed them through this whole time. He's going to provide for them. But he's taking this unique path to feeding Israel because there's a moral lesson in it. There's an ethical lesson in it, a lesson that we need to key into as we live our lives in a land of plenty. All right? Here it is. He assembles Israel, doesn't he? He gathers them together, right? The glory of the Lord is in the cloud. He lets them see his glory in the cloud so that they know that this thing that's about to come their way isn't a happy accident. It's not a survival skill on their part. It's a gift from God. He's going to give them what they need. It's a miracle, okay? What he does because he turns off the manna once they get into Canaan, okay? They don't have that anymore once they're in Canaan, and they don't need it. But it's a miracle, but it's also a lesson. They grumbled for meat. Back in Egypt, we had meat on the pot. So what does he do? He covers the camp in meat. He's like, look, I'm the Lord of all creation. I give everything. All right? I can give you everything you ever need. So they were hungry. So he provides manna. for them. And he gives them this mysterious bread that appears each morning. Some people think it's the leavings of locusts. We're not sure. But the word manna in Hebrew means, what is it? What is it? It is what it is. And the mystery, guys, is intentional. Do we understand why? The mystery of manna is an intentional mystery. They're going to eat, they're going to be fed every day, just enough, without knowing where it comes from, but knowing that it comes from God. My wife and I, early on in our marriage, sat down one Sunday. We were still at Milligan College, and we sat down knowing that our money was tight, and we worked up a budget for the month and realized that for the last 2 months we had survived on exactly $100 less than we actually had. I mean, we weren't in debt, we weren't using a credit card, but somehow from month to month our expenses were this, and our income was exactly $100 short, but somehow by the generosity of others and by lucky, what we would call a lucky circumstance, by this and that, we were meeting our financial obligations, but somehow the income did not equal what was supposed to be going out. And we said, manna is an interesting thing. It is a mystery. You know what? The mystery is intentional for Israel. He's going to teach them to rely on him for their basic needs. Now, the food isn't free. The food isn't free. There are rules. And this is also part of the lesson. Can you obey me in the course of my doing for you? In other words, God is working on this covenant with Israel. He's going to create a covenant. And a covenant is more than a contract. There are lots of contracts, right? In a contract, I agree to pay the bank X amount of money every month, or else Rocco comes to my house and hits me on the head with the kitchen sink. Some contracts are worse than others. But the point is, that's the contract. There's collateral and there's the loan. But in a covenant, the collateral isn't stuff, it's your identity. It's your character. All right? It's who and what you say you are. And in Israel, God is going to be their God, and Israel is going to be his people, but he has to help them understand what the nature of the covenant. And it is that Israel relies on God for their needs, and God meets them. But he has rules as well. Rule number 1 was, don't hoard it. What did the Israelites try to do? Tried to hoard it. And of course, it started to stink as soon as they started hoarding it, which these guys live in a camp together. They're in close quarters. What's the one thing you don't do when you are living in close quarters with other people? It's a basic rule. Don't make a stink. Lived with a guy who thought that salmon patties were the best thing ever. Did he clean up his dishes right after dinner? What? No. No, he didn't. And the whole house smelled like some kind of fish that had come back from the dead and walked into my house. You know what? Don't make yourself a stink in other people's nostrils. It's a real simple thing. But this, this rule was, don't hoard it. And as soon as they did it, they made themselves a stink in each other's nostrils. And it made Moses angry because he knew they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. They weren't honoring the contract. God said, don't gather it on the Sabbath. What did the Israelites run out and do? I mean, they ran out and did it. On the Sabbath, Israel disobeyed God on every count. And again, they came back empty-handed from their manna hunt on the Sabbath, and Moses said, do you understand now? Every now and then, you guys with the parents and the parental situation have the moment where little Chipper disobeys you, hurts himself, and then you walk up and the first words out of your mouth are, what did we learn? All right? What did we learn? This is Israel learning what the rules are and what the boundaries are in the covenant. In a covenant with God, God is going to provide your needs. He's going to work things out for you. But along with that, for the sake of your own spiritual health and mind, we need to stop grasping for things that we know we don't need, especially for the things that he's told us to stay away from, because we'll end up carrying as a burden way more than we actually need. Now, some of you guys do the wilderness thing. Some of you have been with me to wilderness camp at Appalachian Christian Camp. How much food do you pack for a hike? The correct answer is just enough. Too little, and you go hungry. That's not fun. I've been there. You get done, you eat the food that you brought, and you're sitting around going, is that it? Is that all there is? But if you bring too much, you're stuck carrying it for the length of the hike, and you end up carrying more than you want. Another wilderness director told me about this happening at a different week of camp. It was a high school week of wilderness, and they were camping overnight on the trail. And they set out, and they get about a mile in this trail, and one of the boys just starts crying. He just stops in the middle of the trail and starts sobbing. He's like, I can't make it. I can't do this. And they're like, this kid's a scout. What is the deal? So they come over, and they see that his backpack is extra heavy. So they open up his backpack, and they find a Bible that's this thick with a metal cover on the top. They find a full-size wind-up alarm clock and twice the amount of clothes that he needs. And they're like, we are on the trail. We are not going. We cannot go back. We'll lose the daylight. So they ended up having to split this guy's stuff up and carry it in their backpacks. So not only did he make his backpack heavier by carrying stuff he was never supposed to carry, he made everybody else's backpack heavier, carrying the stuff he was never supposed to carry. We persist in a belief in this culture in that we believe that we must acquire all that we need. We live to acquire. Get the job, make the money, buy the thing. Get the job, make the money, buy the thing. And we forget God's hand in the equation. And it's not just material things, is it? We labor under the delusion that the relationships we have are also things we acquire unto ourselves, right? You meet the person, build the relationship, get the marriage. Get the person, build the marriage, buy the minivan, so on down the street. And we forget that God has a say in this thing, and we always hunger for more. Whether it's more in terms of our relationships, or it's more in terms of what we have, or more in terms of the recognition that we get from other people. And we forget that God intends fully to give us what we need. But in grasping for more, we carry things we were never meant to carry. God teaches. Do we listen? Do we listen? Do we know that every blessing comes from God? The blessings come from Him. God gives us things like a work-life balance. That's why He was trying to teach Israel in the desert with the Sabbath. He was trying to show them that there's a week of work, but there's also rest. For some of us, that balance is totally off track. We work ourselves to death, or we believe that we're simply here to relax and do not. But what God gives Israel in the desert is a balance between work and life. And we forget that God is the creator of everything good. And as the creator of all that is good, He intends fully to give us the thing we need, not necessarily the thing we want. In fact, the things that we want can provide, when we reach for what He doesn't provide, it brings misery. Just like Israel trying to hoard up that manna, and then it becomes a stink. Or they go out hunting for what, frankly, isn't there. And guys, if you don't know, that's totally a metaphor for the life of those of us who forget to be content in what God gives us. We got to accept the bread for the journey that God gives us and understand that that's enough. We sang a song today that said, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. He is sufficient, and we've got to get there to understand that what He gives us is sufficient. Acceptance of God's provision creates a thankful heart. We reach for what he doesn't provide for, it just brings us misery. But if we accept what he gives us, it'll lead to us being thankful. And a thankful heart is a happy heart. It's a complete heart. And when you're complete, you won't keep reaching for the things that will not fill you. It ends a cycle of misery. You know, Paul would later say, godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness with contentment is great gain. And that's what God is trying to teach the Israelites out in the desert by giving them just enough for today. And saying, these are the rules around which I have governed your behavior. Take what I give you and be complete. Listen, God is going to give you the good. Accept it and be complete. We're going to sing a song to close out this section of the service. God provides for us better than we ever could for ourselves. And if you're at a place where you are ready to accept what he provides, maybe it's forgiveness for sin. Maybe it's, the grace of God, or, the gift of eternal life, or the gift of the Holy Spirit. If you're ready to rededicate your life to Christ, or declare for baptism, or place your membership with a church, this is your moment to come forward. And if you don't know yet what you want to do, please talk to me or the eldership. We would love to help you make your next step of faith. Let's all stand and sing.